Hey everyone, let's dive right into today's explainer. If you take a look at the map of Europe we've got up here right now, it's pretty wild to see. What began as a regional conflict back in February 2022 has completely locked the continent into this massive geopolitical standoff. So today, we are mapping out the stark reality of the Russia-Ukraine war as of 2026.
Because, right, we are currently in 2026. The initial shockwaves have definitely passed, but the conflict itself, it's fundamentally transformed. We're no longer just looking at traditional battlefield tactics. This has morphed into a massive global issue that is literally reshaping modern military tech, international food supplies, and global energy markets.
So, to really wrap our heads around this complex situation, we're going to hit 5 key areas. 1, the battlefield today. 2, competing national strategies. 3, the global ripple effect. 4, the human cost. And 5, what happens next. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the battlefield today and the massive shift we're seeing in modern warfare. So, the era of rapid offensives? Yeah, that's pretty much over. What we're looking at now is a brutal war of attrition. Across eastern and southern Ukraine, the front lines are relatively stable, but they are incredibly deadly. Neither side has managed a decisive breakthrough. Success right now depends entirely on who can outlast the other in manpower, ammunition, and raw industrial output. It's an absolute grind. And if you look at the facts laid out here on this graphic, this attrition is driving a massive rise in drone warfare. The tactical differences are actually really stark. You've got Ukraine utilizing long-range capabilities to strike deep inside Russian territory, specifically targeting air bases and fuel to choke off logistics. Russia, on the flip side, is deploying waves of missiles and drones against Ukrainian infrastructure and military positions just to maintain relentless pressure. We're talking cheap tech and deep strikes, and it is actively rewriting modern military doctrine before our eyes. Moving right along to Section 2, let's examine these competing national strategies and the resulting tactical deadlock. Now, what's really fascinating about this side-by-side comparison is how these battlefield tactics completely dictate long-term national planning. Russia's strategy is all about holding occupied territory and maintaining continuous pressure, and they're backing that up with heavy investments to expand their long-term defense manufacturing. Conversely, Ukraine combines defense with aggressive, long-range disruption of those Russian supply lines. But a huge, crucial pillar of Ukraine's strategy relies heavily on sustaining that international military support. And of course, to sustain these strategic goals, both nations are carrying absolutely staggering economic burdens. As the data shows, for Russia, that means wildly increased military spending and having to adapt to global sanctions while trying to scale up their defense production. For Ukraine, the economy is just heavily reliant on international aid to stay afloat, all while they grapple with massively damaged industries and astronomically high reconstruction costs. Okay, Section 3, the global ripple effect and the impacts hitting far beyond Europe. Because let's be real, the macroeconomic shockwaves are hitting way outside of Europe. We are literally talking about sustained spikes in global energy prices, severe disruptions to international food exports, and deeply unstable supply chains. This localized conflict has forced governments all over the world to dramatically spike their defense spending and basically rewrite their own national security playbooks from scratch. And diplomatically, well, there is a very stark ideological divide, which is highlighted perfectly by the quote on screen. While the US and Europe provide critical air defense, training, and intelligence, Russia argues that such assistance prolongs the conflict. Western governments, however, counter that it is the absolute only way Ukraine can actually defend its sovereignty. With neither side willing to compromise on territorial control, diplomacy just remains entirely deadlocked. Which brings us to Section 4, the profound human cost, the displacement, and the destruction. Because beyond all the strategy and the global economics, we have to look at the facts on the ground, which show one of the absolute worst humanitarian crises of our time. Millions of civilians remain displaced. Livelihoods and entire communities have been completely shattered. And while exact figures are notoriously hard to verify, we're looking at unverified casualties in the hundreds of thousands. Just rebuilding these lives in these cities is going to require decades of dedicated international aid. Finally, Section 5. What happens next? Let's forecast the future. So where does this whole thing go from here? Well, analysts logically break the future down into 3 main scenarios. Scenario 1 is a prolonged stalemate, just a grinding continuation of the attrition we see today with no major territorial changes. Scenario 2 is a negotiated ceasefire, which would bring a temporary halt to fighting, though a comprehensive peace would remain incredibly difficult. Or Scenario 3, escalation. This is where long-range strikes and regional tensions intensify, dragging the globe even deeper into the crisis. So here's the ultimate question.
Both sides are locked into their strategic objectives, and a decisive military victory just remains out of sight. Without that clear victory, what will it actually take to break the global deadlock? Unless some sort of diplomatic miracle occurs, how long will this exhausting war of attrition continue to define our world? Thank you so much for exploring this with us. Keep asking those tough questions and keep looking closely at the data.